Standing by. All right. Hey everybody, this is Mark. This is Dice Monkey, and today I'm going to be painting up a dwarven forge, not to be confused with the company Dwarven Forge, for Printable Scenery. This model was printed and provided by TabletopTerrainMinis. They sent this to me to ask me to do something with it. So I'm going to be doing a painting stream on this and one other building that they've provided. So today we're going to be covering the Dwarven Forge. So you can see here that it actually has removable rooftops, which is pretty nice. And then there's a whole interior in here. Let me rotate that. There we go. There's a whole interior in here that's pretty cool. And then we've got this whole back area as well. So we're going to be sitting down and getting this painted up. I've got a dwarf army, so I asked him to provide a couple of different dwarf buildings. That'll be able to use those for Warhammer the Old World. I've got plenty of castle bits and things like that, so to mix it up a bit, we're going to be working on this. So first of all, I'm going to be blocking in the colors. It's going to be pretty simple and straightforward. So I'm going to be getting the roof in blue because a lot of my fantasy inspiration from a young age started with Warcraft 2 and all those blue roofed buildings. So we're going to be doing a blue roof on these, especially because my dwarf army is also in blue. Let's see. There we go. And then we're going to be getting some of the gray along the stonework of the walls and on the interior, and some metal on some of the parts that are particularly strong metal, and then we're going to start working on all the details. So that's what we're going to be working on today. So I'm starting here with Prussian blue. And I use these little fidget toys to actually hold all of my paint, because then once it dries, I can pop it right out and remove it to clean it out. So I'm going to start here. I'm not super concerned about getting super deep in the cracks for a couple reasons. Firstly, because I sprayed it in black, we're going to have the black act as shadows. And then secondly, because I'm probably going to end up inking this with some blue, so that'll fill in the cracks even more with some blue. I'm going to bring this camera down a little bit more. Make it a little bit easier to see. Let's see. How's that? Is that better? Looks like it. Okay. So then we're going to get this piece as well. When you're painting large surfaces like this, you run out of your paint real quick. When I was spray painting these, I didn't get along the back side here with the spray paint, so I'm going to be going back over these later and filling this in with black just so that it doesn't stand out as resin. Okay, that should be good. I'm not really aiming for like super precise here when I'm starting off with this step. I'm just going for looking good, great so far. Thanks. It's we're blocking out all the colors, so it's pretty simple and straightforward to begin with. And then certain of these tiles will end up, the shingles will be slightly different colors of blue, just so that it stands out more on the tabletop. There's almost no roof on this part, or blue roof part on this part, so this should be pretty straightforward. And I got some on these other parts that are going to be metal, but that doesn't really matter because just getting it initially blocked in. Okay, so that's the end of the roof basing. Now we're going to work on the stonework. All right, we're going to be using, I think we're going to use uniform gray here. And we're going to be getting both the interior and the exterior. And I'm going to dry off the brush a little bit to give a little bit more of a dry brush and shading to it. Getting back here is a little bit tricky. This all came as one part. So I'll probably mostly leave that alone back there once I've gotten it all painted in. Should get that more central. And there's parts like right up underneath here. I could paint that. I'm probably just going to leave that alone because unless you're flipping over the entire building, you will not be seeing it at all. And I don't intend to flip the building. So we don't have to really focus on that at all. Need to make, there we go. Making it more centralized so that people can see it. One thing to note, this is going to be a well-used forge. So we're actually going to be going in and dirtying up the center of it inside the building a little bit to make sure that it looks like it's been seeing regular use. I've got an upcoming game of the old world. I've got a buddy who's building a dwarf army, but he doesn't have a lot of models yet for it. So the last game and then this game, he's been using mine. So we're going to be playing in a couple weeks. I'll do another battle report because I've been doing steady battle reports and posting those up. There we go. So I'm going to be posting up battle reports, and we're going to be using this forge in particular as part of that whole battle report. The battle will be taking place around it. So this, I really need to, you know what, we're going to adjust this to make it more centralized to make sure I get. Is this better? There we go. Now we can see it a lot better. Okay. So we're going to be basing the battle entirely around this forge. The last game we were fighting over a valley, and so we ended up coming to a bit of a stalemate. I think we were only within a couple of points of one another. So this game is going to take place in the valley again, and a dwarf has built a forge in the valley, sort of as a screw you to the Bretonians for claiming it's theirs. And so that's where the central battle will take place. Ah, that was a bit heavy there. It'll all be fine. I imagine this back room here is used for like storage and things like that. So if I was going to be using this for like a role-playing game scenario and stuff, I'd probably fill this back area with a bunch of crates and things like that. Though maybe, you know, if he's working late nights in the forge, he uses this as a bedroom. He's got a cot set up. Like I said, this has been sent to me by TabletopTerrainMinis. They're over on Etsy. And he just asked me if I was interested in working with him. And so he sent along a couple of buildings and asked me to paint them up. And I offered to do a live stream so we can show these things off. His prints are really, really smooth. Like, you can barely see any layer lines at all, which is really nice. And once I'm getting the paint on them, the layer lines disappear even more, which is really, really nice. There's a little bit of spidering here. Okay. All right. Let me cover that up that I just cut away. And I think that's it for the stonework. Yeah. Pretty solid stuff. And because this is a forge, I don't imagine he's... Oh, I've got to get more stonework up top. So because this is a forge, I don't imagine he's got a lot of money. So I'm not going to use a ton of gold on this, as much as I love giving my dwarves gold stuff. It's going to be a lot of plain metal and copper, or plain like steel and copper for a lot of it. All right, there we go. Now I've got So I'm going to hit everything metal with like a, let's see, we're using lead belcher here. And I prefer my lead belcher Citadel color as the air version because I find it just flows a lot smoother, which I like. So yeah, even though it's a little bit runnier, I tend to use it a lot more as a dry brush, generally. I don't put it on super heavy, because otherwise it starts running everywhere. So, alright. Like I said, as a dry brush for things, it makes it so that everything, all the black sort of acts as shadow for the whole thing, which is nice. If there's a little bit of spillover from here onto the tiles, that's not a problem either, because we'll be doing touch-ups. And also by dry brushing on the metal, it gives it a little bit more beaten look to it, so there's lighter and darker places. I think I'm almost done actually using the silver with a big broad brush, because there's some more precise stuff around the edges that I want to be a bit more precise about. I'm still not sure what I'm going to do with the bellows here. I think I'm going to do that in brown. I like to have a lot of earth tones in my stuff. I think it just makes it look a bit more natural. Okay, yeah, I want to get all this stuff I'm going to do with a finer brush. I'll get a bit more. Alright. So now we're done with the big brush for now. We'll come back to it later on for inking. Alright. Actually, we're going to keep using this silver just with a finer brush. Let's see. 10 o'clock, so in about 40 minutes, I've got to register for all the events I want to do at Gamehole Con, which I'm going to be attending in October. So we'll take a quick little pause while I submit all that stuff. I should have actually used the bigger brush in here on the floor. All right. Now I can clean that off. So yeah, this dwarf building has a lot more metal than you'd typically see on a lot. Basically places where a human structure would probably use wood, the dwarves have instead used metal to reinforce and hold together their stone building. Hey, Jimmy. Looks like Jimmy popped in for a second. Looking good, thank you very much. There is actually a door that goes right here on the back. You can see there's a little, I'm not sure if you can see from here. There's a little pinhole here, so you can put a little wire through to hold the door, and then you can have the door swing open and closed, which is really nice. So I'm going to be doing that once this whole building's done. There's what looks like some dwarven runes along these pieces, which I imagine are runes of protection. So I may end up making them glow, or at least I'll just do them in a different color so that they stand out. I'm going to leave these shutters alone for now. We'll come back and do them in more detail. You should probably watch more painting streamers and see what they do to keep their viewers entertained when they're just steadily, slowly, boringly painting up stuff. One of the reasons why I specifically chose to do YouTube Live is, one, because I already have the channel set up and don't have, Twitch subscribers. And you can do this on Twitch too, but I like that you can do it on YouTube where you can't do it on TikTok. I like that that this live is saved, so I can point people to it later. So even though that there's looks like no viewers right now, I can still point people to this and they can watch the live stream later. Here's where the painting gets tricky when you're trying to paint on the inside. You have to kind of keep your distance with your brush. I think this is supposed to be a piece of solid stone, so when I'm going back in and doing stuff, I'm going to go ahead and grab a different... Actually, I've still got some... Still got some gray here. Alright, I think I'm done with the base metals and things like that. Oh, I've got one more spot right up here. Am I in frame? Yeah. I really want to pick up at some point the Vanta black, the blackest black. I think it'd be fun for things like inside of this chimney here, painting it up so it just looked solid black all the way down. From what I recall, it's not too expensive either. It's like a small bottle is like 15, but you're not going to be using all that much of it. I also like for like my ring wraith miniatures and things like that, you could paint the inside of their hoods so that it's just solid black. I think things like that would be really cool. Okay. I'm actually going to use some of the blue here. I know I had said I was not going to mess with those right now, but I want these to be, the shutters to be blue. Okay. So now we're going to be... Oh, I still got to get... I keep putting my silver white this one. I still need to use it. Get the top of this roof piece. Metal. And we should probably get the back of this here. A little bit more precise. Okay. I wonder if next time I should shift the whole camera this way so it's looking more over my shoulder. But yeah, okay. So with that, when I slap that together, that's your base building done. It looks pretty boring at the moment because it's just grays and silvers. So to warm it up a bit, we're gonna do some bronze in some places. We're gonna lighten up some of these tiles here. I'm gonna go ahead and start with the tiles. I'll show you how we get that done. So here we're using ultramarine model color. And we're gonna take our big fat brush again, and we're gonna like really dry brush it, like dry it off here. And then we begin brushing on. And hopefully, yeah, that shows up on camera. You can see. The darkest recesses don't lighten up. You can always tell when it's a little bit too strong, but it'll all blend in. You can usually pick up a little bit of paint off the places you've brushed it off on the paper towel. I think that's pretty good. It's a little bit brighter on this side than this side, so I think I'm actually going to do another round of dry brushing over on this side. But I'll do it roughly because we've already got the dry brushing on there. I do need more paint though. How's it going, Francois? Yeah, we're working on this dwarven forge by Printable Scenery. The model's been printed and provided by TabletopTerrainMinis, and their stuff's over on Etsy, and it's actually pretty inexpensive. They've got some really great stuff over there, and their prints are super, super smooth. So I'm just working my way through that. There we go. See, now it's actually like popping a lot more. And it's very uneven, but that's fine. It's supposed to be a bit uneven. And then when we ink things, it'll smooth out the light and the dark. Okay, I'm going to pull off this roof. Never put enough paint in there because I always underjudge how much I'm going to need. But the big brushes really suck it up. All right. So that part is done. With the metal itself, like I'm not going to do any dry brushing like this on it. I'm going to be inking it and also adding some other colors. Just waiting for a buddy to show up for a game of 40K. Nice. I've actually lately been slowly drifting away from 40k with this edition, and really enjoying Warhammer the Old World a lot more. I've got a bunch of my dwarves here, and these are questing knights that I'm working on as well, and then just past those I've got a bunch of Empire. So now I'm not going to do any dry brushing specifically on the stone either. Instead, I'm going to pick out specific stones to make a bit lighter. So I got this light gray. It's pretty close to this uniform gray, so I don't know that I need to necessarily use that. So I'll try some of this rainy gray. And I'll specifically pull out this brush. And because I'm going to ink this, I'm fine going a little bit heavy on this because like I said, the ink's going to mellow things out. And I'm just picking out random stones. Now, nobody's going to notice this, but these stone walls are pretty thin, so the stone you see on this side is actually going to be the same stone as the opposite side, I think. Yes. Printable Scenery did plan for that. So, you want to make sure that your interior stonework matches the exterior. Not that anybody's going to notice, but I will. And I'll know. I do the same thing when I'm doing my my dungeon terrain. I think I may make a couple of these blocks. I may grab some brown paint and do some of them in brown, just to add some more variety. I'm also going to get the interior, get a couple of these stone blocks in lighter. Prefer 30k? Oh yeah, the dark elves. I've always liked the aesthetic of the dark elves, and I would love to actually play 30k, but it seems like you have to have a lot of miniatures for that. Which I shouldn't be saying much because the old world with its rank and flank stuff does require a lot of miniatures. But at some point, I'm going to get into 30k and play something, but I'm just not sure what. Yeah, 10th edition Die Hammer. I've actually been playing quite a bit of 3rd edition with my friend. I play my Orc Army for 3rd edition. And that was the edition that I first started on, so I've still got my Space Marine Army from that edition as well. But I've been primarily playing my Orcs with 3rd edition, and I actually really, really love 3rd edition 40k. It's also distinct enough from 10th edition that, like, it doesn't feel like I'm just going back to it for, like, some slight rules tweaks. It feels like an entirely different game. On the inside, I want quite a bit more variety of the stones than the outside ones. So I'm going to do a lot of these in gray. Let's see. I'm going to try to squeeze. Like I said, ink forgives all, so we'll be able to go back in and get it touched up nicely when I ink the whole thing. You know, I've not played second edition 40K. I need to, because I remember I started in third edition and I really, really enjoyed how it played, and I remember looking at and seeing how second edition had used like tons more cards and was a lot more wild and everything. So I've looked at it and I never actually played it, and I would love to actually sit down and play a game with second edition. I've probably got enough like orcs and space marines and stuff that I could probably play it pretty easily, and you could find the files online. So at some point I'll have to sit down and actually give it a try. But for Warhammer Fantasy, I played. I can't remember. I have a harder time remembering the editions for Warhammer Fantasy. I played the edition that had the Bretonnians and Lizardmen as the starter box. Oh well, that's a pretty shitty attitude to have. I'm gonna put that user in timeout. There we go. We had been having a good time with Francois there, but I'm sure he'll drop out of the chat. I just assumed he had misspelled die. Not that he was going to be one of those shitheads. Alright, I think that's probably enough on the interior of this specific color. For the floor, now we're going to get all the walls. And these ones are thick enough that I don't feel like I need to go in and I don't need to go in and make sure the opposite side is the same. There's a whole chunk of the actual like forge where the fire's actually going back here. So that doesn't need to match. And I like to make sure that like when I do different blocks that they don't actually make contact with one another. I think it makes it look a lot more interesting if you don't have a bunch of blocks that are the same right next to each other. Okay. And we're going to work on this wall. So okay, making sure that we can see everything. Okay, so we got key blocks on the interior. So this block on the outside gets lightened. And is it, yeah, this block here, part of it gets covered up by one of the shields. And this one here, and this big one down here. This part's the one that's most time consuming, but I think this will make the building look most interesting. And then looks like we got this one here. Oh, no, I miscalculated. It's fine. Nobody's going to be looking at both sides of this to make sure that the colors match up. That's just my own nitpickiness. And in fact, some of these parts are covered up by shields, so I'm just going to give it more places where the light gray emerges. Yeah, that should be good. Okay, so now we're going to be working on the back half of the building here. Remember, on any corner blocks, that needs to wrap around. We're about 11 minutes away from me needing to sign up for all of my games at GameholeCon. I've got a couple of particular game designers that I'm wanting to play in their games, so those are my highest priority. I see at some cons people will go and basically spend the entire weekend playing in a single tournament for a particular game, whether it's like a board game or a war game, and that I just don't understand, because one of my favorite things about going to a con is the huge variety of stuff you get to do, and just thinking about like just sitting down and only playing a single game all weekend just seems so confusing to me. So like I see people will go and play, you know, like at a 40K tournament at a con, and that's their entire weekend, and they're doing that from like first thing in the morning to late at night for 3 days straight. I'm like, what do you... Like, I understand the competitive scene. It's just cons always feel like they're there for you to play the most stuff you possibly can. So it's probably why I'm not a competitive player, though. I'm going to try to get some of the interior blocks here. I'm not going to try super hard on the walls because they're difficult to get to. And this is primarily going to be used in wargaming, where you're not necessarily going to see a ton of the interiors. I want to get the interior of the main forge itself done really nicely. just because it'll look really cool. But here I don't see myself pulling this roof off of the back here very often unless we're playing in a role-playing game. Okay. However, this part, because it's much more exposed and visible, I'm going to be making sure to get that as well. All right. I think that's good for there. So the only thing I have left to do is this central little smokestack here. That's looking pretty good there. Need more though. I like making sure that both big stone blocks and small ones both get the lighter stone treatment to mix things up. I think that's good. I don't think I need, gotta kind of keep an eye out for where there seems to be massive gaps in the lighter stonework. I'm gonna try to get in here a little bit, get a couple of stones back behind everything. There we go. All right, I think that looks pretty good. So let's throw down some lighter tiles. I'm trying to think. Let's see. I'm going to actually go ahead and mix some of my rainy gray and my ultramarines together. So I'm going to scoop out my ultramarines, put it in here. Then that quite a thin layer, so I'm going to scoop out some of my gray and I'm going to mix all that in. go. It's a sort of bluish gray there. Yeah, that looks good. So I'm going to grab this while it's rapidly trying to dry out. I'm going to hit random tiles. The problem is that I just kind of randomly mixed it, and so I don't have a strong formula. There was a bit more blue than there was gray, so when this dries out and I can't use it, I'm going to have to remake some more. And we'll see if I can get it to color match. All right. Okay. Let's mix it up, see what we get. This one is a bit darker, but yeah, it's quite a bit darker. But it's much lighter than the standard blue, which is good enough for me. How many years have I been painting models? I have been painting, let's see, I started at about 14, so 25 years now. And there was, there was big chunks where I had a few years in between painting, but yeah. Typically with terrain, I don't spend a heavy amount of time on my terrain. Like, I try to get it all painted up and looking nice enough for the battlefield. In this case, I'm spending a little bit more time on this than I think I typically would. So because this is a darker blue than this super light blue that I had made, I'm going to overlay this on the other side so that I'll have basically 3 different colors of tiles. And I'm not one of those like pro painters who does like super high quality miniatures and things like that. Like, my goal is always just to make them look good on the battlefield. And occasionally I'll take up paint commissions. Like, I've got a friend right now who's basically has me painting just a ton of stuff for him. He's basically financing my trip to GameholeCon. Speaking of, it's 10 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and process my wish list for GameholeCon. Let's see if it works. Let's see here. It says it's processing. I'm guessing every single person going to GameholeCon is probably clicked that button at the same moment. So while it's processing, we'll keep painting. All right. I would not be surprised if their website crashes. So GameholeCon is, I believe they label themselves as the largest convention that is like solely focused on role-playing games. I mean, not solely, they got board games and stuff like that as well. But primarily focused on RPGs. Like, I think every single one of their guests of honor, I believe, is good luck with the con. Thanks. Yeah, I'm hoping to get all of the games I want in. the what was I saying? Oh, so like all I think all the guests are all RPG designers. So it is primarily focused on that. But like I've got myself set up. They apparently have some giant battle tech. Okay. Looks like looks like I was not able to get a bunch of the games. Okay. I was able to get some of them though. So now I'm going to go see what I can get. So I was able to get my game in with looks like I'll be able to play with Matt Forbeck, who designed the Marvel Multiverse RPG. I'll be playing in that. And then what I'm going to do is basically, because I've got all these, yeah, I've got the BattleTech large scale. We got some Blood on the Clock Tower. I've got Learn to Play Symbaroum. I didn't get any One Ring RPG. Oh, and I got Life Size Kill Dr. Lucky. So now I can go through and pick out events that I've got, that I've still got room for, you know? Let's see. Okay. So yeah, then like later on I'll go through and I'll pick out which events I want to play in that are still available, because there should be some still available. Okay. It's a nice little side tangent. So yeah, the large size BattleTech, the mechs are supposed to be like, I think, a foot tall, and so much larger hexes, and so that should be a lot of fun. I'm assuming they're probably 3D printed and everything, but I'm really excited for that. Yeah, the way that Gamehole works is that you sign up, you put it down a giant wish list, and you rank them in order of priority. And if somebody has higher priority that they want an event than you, and they have not, or if they've checked out, then you can't get it. So that's why everybody kind of rushes. So, and then they've got a nice giant list where you can look over your schedule. So now I'll be able to go through my schedule and see what times I have open now. And I don't necessarily want to fill my entire time with just games, because I want to be able to go around and hang out with friends and visit the dealer booth and the dealer booths and all that different type of stuff. So all right, I think that's good. So when it's all together like that, already this building's looking a lot more interesting than it was. You can see with all the extra color and stuff. So now we're going to work on making the metal more interesting. So I've got two different colors here: hammered copper and rust monster. Rust monster looks a lot more like rust. So we're going to focus on this hammered copper here. And that is going to make things a lot more interesting. So I like to imagine that as he's worked on his forge, certain pieces have broken off and he's had to replace them in places. He didn't necessarily have the same metal. So there we go. And then one thing I'm going to do too at the end is I'm actually going to take some of my mud texturing and sort of brush it along the bottom. I've got some tufts of grass that I'll probably end up sticking along, like places where the grass has grown in. There we go, that's looking good. Yeah, already this stuff is popping a lot more. This is a solid piece of metal, so I'm going to leave that. I'm going to cap these copper. And then this whole structure here with the bellows and the chain and stuff, I'm going to be using a lot more different colors to make it stand out a lot. And I'm not really planning this, I'm just sort of seeing where it takes me. Yeah, that looks good. Here we go. We'll have this part that connects into the side of the building be in copper as well. And mostly this copper is being used to just break up the boring, identical coloring across the whole thing. This piece has a lot more different colors, so I imagine that this has regularly gotten itself replaced and modified. So there's going to be a lot of copper on this. We're still seeing that from here. Cool. Yeah, I think that's good. Now let's see. I think this braiding, this metal braiding in here, I'm going to have be copper as well. And this, when I just run it down here, it fills in pretty well. And if you have a little bit of the silver poking out in places, that's okay. Yeah, that looks real nice. As you can see, tons more color across the whole thing. Pops a whole lot more than it did. I'm going to add a little bit more. These are the D&D print paints. I picked them up just because the shop I went into didn't have that much variety, and I really needed these colors. I'm going to get these little runes that I had mentioned before here on the doorway. And then I'm also going to get these window frames. Yeah, that looks good. All right. So these bellows, they've got a strip of metal at each point along here. So I'm going to get that painted. And it looks like the top is actually also metal. There we go. And one thing that's important to note is that this is going onto a battlefield, and players don't spend a lot of time staring at the terrain on the battlefield. You're focusing on the game itself. So that's looking pretty good. I need to add more bronze to this stuff here. Yeah, that's good. Okay. All right, this braiding here, I wanted to actually do in gold, because that's like the front of the shop, and so he'd be spending a little bit of money making sure that was pretty. So I've got my Army Painter War Paints Bright Gold. It's like my favorite gold. It's real smooth. Has good coverage. So here's where we're actually starting to add the color that's going to make these buildings interesting. All right, that looks good. So I also want, let's see. These parts look like they're supposed to have some runes. FDM printing can sometimes make parts that are like vertical walls. It can make them look a little off when you're trying to do specific details like runes and things like that. All right. So I think, let me go ahead and get some brown on this bellows, and then I think I'm done with the outside beyond the washing. So now we've been at this for a little bit over an hour now, about an hour 20 minutes, and we're basically done with the building on the outside except for the washing and everything. Cool. All right. Let's go ahead and grab. Where did I put it? I've got my here we go. My go-to brown for a lot of stuff is this Steel Legion drab. At one point I had like 6 bottles of it, and so I used it for pretty much everything. This bottle's starting to run low, it looks like. Okay. So this leather of the bellows pretty straightforward. All right. Now we're just going to give it a little. All right. Nice. Okay. So let's go ahead and work on the interior. So one thing of note is that we've got the forge here. Oh, actually, I need to do some. Actually, you know what? I'm going to leave the stonework black back here because it would have been blackened by all the fire. So we've got the coals and everything here. I'm going to do something fancy with that. I'll show you in a second. And then on this forge, there are runes that are embedded. And this is a dwarven forge, so those runes are going to be magical. So I'm going to make those glow. And then I've got the shields over here, and I've got the 2 hammers. So that's my main stuff I'm going to be working on inside of here. The forge, or the actual anvil itself, I'm going to leave black. But I'm going to do a little bit of like edge highlighting with grays. So to begin with, let's get the runes on the interior here painted. I'm going to be a little bit messy just because it's hard to get in there, and then I'm going to touch up with black to that up. And there's runes all along the bottom of this as well. All right. Very messy. That's how it's supposed to be. All right. Then these coals back here, I'm going to coat them in pretty heavy white. Trust the process. All right. And then we got to leave those to dry for a bit. So we're going to go back to Steel Legion drab. And this shield here is wood. wood done. And then we'll touch up the edges with gold. Then we've got the handles on the hammers. And then this, based on the, I think this is supposed to be a wood mattock here. So we're going to paint this in. All right. Looks good. And then this shield here, I'm going to have this be mostly gold, just so that it pops a lot more. The white's still drying, so we're going to leave that for a little bit longer. Let's get some gold on this other shield. And again, this is interior. You're not going to see it super close. So you're just trying to make it, when you're looking at it from a bit of a distance, it looks good. That's a nice straightforward shield there. Let's do this whole thing in gold, and once we ink it with brown, the details will look a lot better. One thing I'm going to be doing too is on all the edges, I'm going to be repainting over those in black so that they stand out. Okay, so I think we've got this forge part all nice and ready. So I think I'm going to use Frost Heart. It's a contrast paint. It's a bright blue. But what I'm first going to do is paint back over the forge parts that I did not want. I'm going to try. No, dry brushing isn't really doing it. So going back in. Yeah, that looks good. Here we go. A quick little dry brush across that, and it filled in everything but the cracks. Cool. So I'm waiting for that to dry. Then I'm going to switch over and actually grabbing this fluorescent orange. Now, this fluorescent orange is actually really bad at mixing. All right. That'll have to do. It's not great, but it'll have to do. So I'm basically going in and covering all that white with this orange. It looks like the white wasn't fully dry, but it'll be fine. So you can see there, trying to get it so there we go. You can see the orange mixed in there. That's going to take quite a while to dry, so I'm going to leave that alone. I may end up inking most of the rest of this before I ever get back to that point, because that paint's a bit thick. But trust the process. Trust the process. Okay. So now we've got our frost heart. It tends to clump near the bottom, so this needs a stronger shake. I need to get one of those automatic paint shakers at some point. Okay. So here, I'm basically just painting in the white with this blue. And then I'm going back in and I'm pulling out some of that blue, sucking it up with a paintbrush. There. Let's get, there we go. And you can see it's got a little nice simple blue in there. I'm not sure how well that shows up on camera. So I think at this point, we're now down to inking, other than, you know, what's going on inside the forge. And also, I do want to dirty up the interior a bit with some like little black soot spots, but that won't happen until, hey Frank, how's it going? That won't end up happening until everything's inked and dried. And the issue is that the drying is going to take a bit of time with inking, because my inks always take forever because I put it on pretty heavily. So we may not actually end up finishing that by the end of this stream. We've probably got about a half hour left on the stream, so hopefully it'll be dry by then. But a lot of times I will ink things and then just walk away and not come back to them for quite a while. So let's go ahead and start with our blue ink. This is Drakenhof Nightshade, and that's what I'm going to get on all of the roof pieces. So, and already you can see the lighter and the darker spots are blending quite a bit more. My friend this F and GM says I need to make my own inks, but he says they work a lot better, and I'm sure they do. But that would require a lot more effort. And also, my concern with that is making sure it's the same consistency, because that's a big concern, of making sure that it's this exact same shade, especially when you're working on like armies and stuff like that. Like if you're working on a single building, sure, but once you start working on full armies, I feel like that can throw things off quite a bit if you've got different shades. So another issue with inking is where to hold it. All right. The great thing is that if I'm going to be doing black ink on almost everything else, and black ink can go on over the top of this blue ink, like if it leaks over onto it, without any problem whatsoever. Still in frame? Yeah. Cool. I find it's worth my time to buy what I need. Yeah, the consistency is a big thing. Like trying to mix my own colors is also tricky, because I never am sure exactly if I've got exactly what I'm gonna need for colors and making sure that it's the same. So I would rather buy like 3 shades of blue and then work my way up using those consistent shades of blue and know that it's going to be the same every single time. So the coals here are still very, very wet, so I'm going to be still leaving those for a while. And I'll work on, there, blue's all done. So now we get to switch over to our Nuln Oil, healer of all things. Okay. So we're going to lay that, I'm going to slap it on pretty thick, and then I'm going to spread it out from there, especially with this big brush and everything. It's going right into all the cracks. It's darkening up a lot of stuff. I'm going to be using this black also on the bronze too, whereas I think normally a lot of times I'd probably use a brown, but it's just to make the colors consistent across the whole thing. And because this blue is still a little bit wet, if a little bit of blue gets into the silver metal as I'm doing this, that's not a problem either, because it's just more shading. So I'm just the base of this entire model, by the time I'm done with the inking, is just going to be very, very wet. Oh, see, I got a little bit too strong on my black here, and it leaked across into here. But again, like, blue and black aren't that dissimilar, and it's just gonna add more variety in color. I am gonna get these bellows, I'm gonna do those in brown ink. So I'm gonna largely avoid, I got some black ink on there. I'm gonna largely avoid inking that so that I can go back over it. I'm looking at possibly next Saturday. I need to look at what my schedule is, but possibly next Saturday doing another paint stream to cover the brew house. The brew house is a much, much larger building, so I don't know that I can get it done in 2 hours like I was able to with this. Ooh, this is actually dripping. There's so much ink on it. Let's spread that out a bit. But I will, I'll do a 2-hour stream and we'll see how far we get. Yeah, that looks good. One problem with inking a whole building is the point at which you aren't sure where to hold it, because the whole model's going to be wet. And I've got a bunch leaking underneath too. I'm probably going to need more Nuln Oil once I'm done with this, because I'm using quite a bit. All right. Looks like where I can grab is like right here. Ooh, that is really heavily leaking on the underside. I can grab right here where this is going to be painted black later, as I bring this around to get the interior. don't want this to streak, so when I cause streaks, I then sort of bat at it with the brush. These shields are going to get brown ink on them. And, oh, my fingers are actually sticking as the ink's drying on the underside. And then I gotta get this whole wall. Okay. So, that point, that part of the building is basically inked. I'm going to work on getting this part done. So we're going to work our way across the metal up top here. Then across the front, we're going to go a bit heavier, and it's I'm going to soak up a little bit because it's a little too heavy. Okay. At that point, everything is inked, and, well, I guess I haven't done the brown ink. I'll do the brown ink really quick. But this all has to dry a lot. So the inside of the forge is still wet. So I think once I'm done with this brown inking, we're going to wrap up the stream. And then I'll make a video showing everything finished later. Where is my brown ink? Perils of ADHD. Where did I put my brown ink? You know what? I don't typically use Agrax Earthshade. Oh! Haha, found it. Okay, Seraphim Sepia. So I'm gonna get that all over this, and then I ended up with it dripping back there. Okay, so everything's inked. Everything is still very, very wet. And there's not really much I can do at this point other than wait for it to dry, which I'm not going to make all you stick around for that. So the things that I still have left to do at the end of this is all of the places that are like where the main building meets the roof, the backs of the roofs, where everything's supposed to be connected and isn't actually supposed to be, like if I glued it together, you wouldn't see it. Those I'm going to paint in black, so they're solid black. Then, back here with the actual forge, or not the forge, but the, where like the coals are, I'm going to be, once that's dry, I'm going to be dry brushing that with black so that only the top parts are black and then the lower parts are actually still that orange. And so that'll make it look like there's coals burning in there. And then I'm going to be moving along the outside edge and dry brushing in brown around the outside edge at the bottom so that it looks like it fits in with the terrain a lot better. And then I've also got these little tufts of grass and flowers and stuff. And I'll put a couple around the outside edge, like there's been a little bit of overgrown stuff growing out there. And then that'll be it. So there's not really too much more to do. I'll probably come back to this in an hour and get that touched up just to really let this dry. But even then, I put on so much ink, it may not be dry in an hour. So, yeah, that's where I'm at. I want to thank everybody who tuned in for watching, and for anybody who ended up coming in and is here to check it out later, at a later point. Thanks for watching. Thanks for your time, and I will see you later.